I think now we should be live. Hello, is it working? Can y'all hear us? Am I getting audio? We should. I hope so. Am I getting audio? Can you guys hear us? Am I not?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Yep, we got someone saying yes.
Hello and welcome to IndieCade's Beyond Screens. I am your host, Peih-Gee Law, here with my co-host David Spira. And today we are going to be showcasing one of the nominees from IndieCade's Anywhere, Everything Anywhere Game Festival. And we are joined by Jorge Lopes Ramos from ZU UK. Welcome, George.
Great, welcome. Great to be here.
Awesome. So, congratulations on your nomination for the IndieCade Festival, which features really unique independent indie games from small indie studios. And would you like to share a little bit about your game and your company?
Sure. I'll try and do this sharing. Okay, is that working okay?
Um, is it? Did you want to screen share, or did you want to just tell us a little bit about it before you get into like presentation?
Why not? I'll tell you a little bit. Um, so I'll assume you know nothing about ZUK and our work. So we are a independent theatre and digital arts company based in London, but we operate a lot in Liverpool, London, but also Rio de Janeiro. And we have collaborators in Brazil, Colombia, and in Canada that we've been working with for quite a number of years. The company started making work about 20 years ago. We were more of a theatre group then. And then we made something called Hotel Medea around between 2006, 2012. And that became a big hit at the time. And that's when our work started being called immersive. And we do resist a lot that term, but that's probably a conversation for another program. But since then, we've been making a number of things that use interactivity in some way, use audience engagement in some way, often in public spaces, and with propositions that, as we like to describe, hack the familiar. So they in one way or another, they shouldn't really feel too weird so that a kind of common person wouldn't be put off. And that comes from our, desire to, we come from theatre, come from the arts, and can be very elitist places and very kind of cliquey and, artists making work for themselves. And we try really as hard as we can, both myself and Peih-Gee Maravala, artistic director, as well as our fantastic team and collaborators, who I wouldn't have time to list, but who we love very much and are indebted to, try to make work for people like us, people that didn't, grow up with privilege, that didn't come from circles of kind of middle class culture and education. And so if someone's in a bus stop and someone's so, curious, slightly curious, they should be able to step in to whatever it is that we're proposing or offering or inviting people to do. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We've created a dating agency called Binaural Dinner Date, where we take over cafes or restaurants or shopping malls sometimes. And anyone that is slightly curious can sit down, put on some headphones, and across the table from them is either someone that came with them or a stranger. And they're guided through these instructions on the headphone as to how to date. And we have had more than 20 couples come out of that. So very proud of that. And we've also had other projects that are a bit more kind of respond to kind of a social commentary. So we have Pick Me Up and Hold Me Tight, where we rang all of the payphones in the UK at the same time on the 1st of January at 11 a.m. to mark the peak of suicides in the UK at that time. And it was an artwork on listening. So people that did wake up at 11 a.m. on the 1st of January, after probably a very late night, made that effort. They had a really sort of nice piece of interactive audio that they listened to. And now we made this game, our first proper game, I guess. We won't get into the conversation what makes a game, but I guess
we might be getting into that.
Okay, great. I'll leave that to you.
Yeah.
But I guess enough people agree that is gamey enough. So that's Radio Ghost. So it's a ghost hunt for shopping malls. It can happen in any mall, anywhere, as long as it's covered and enclosed. And the game starts by entering the mall. But I have a small presentation, so maybe I can share it now or leave it for later.
Gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. I had a quick question. You used the term hacking the familiar. So what did you mean exactly by that term?
So the other thing I didn't mention is I'm also professor of interactive theatre and performance at the University of Greenwich. So again, we are involved in academia. We have partnership with the brilliant Technoculture Arts and Games in Montreal, in Concordia. And we all kind of interested in figuring out how game mechanics and game design can be applied to non-gamey things, or to kind of interventions and interactions that challenge the notion of what a game or even theatre can be. And hacking the familiar, I think, is the closest thing we've gotten to a kind of concept that makes use of what quite a lot of us, or maybe the majority of people, have a sense of familiarity with. So, for example, a dating agency is not necessarily a comfortable thing, but it's certainly a familiar thing. You know, the idea, whether you've been to a date or not, the idea of going on a blind date is very well known. So, and why that's important, it's for two reasons, really. One is, if you sign up for it, you're kind of signing up for the overall expectation of how excruciating it can be, or how disappointing it can be. So you're signing up for something honest. You're not being tricked into an experience that might put you in a position that you never wanted to be in the first place. And very much so, if you're not feeling like that, you're more than welcome to say, actually, it's not for me. It's better that way, right? And the other thing is that a lot of, and that's back to the conversation of, why we resist the term immersive. A lot of the immersive, what is called immersive these days in the mainstream, is really not equipped to ensure that the care for audiences is ethical, and there's not enough thought. There's a lot of hype usually, and a lot of
It's just so broad.
irresponsible.
It's a very broad term that doesn't, and people have certain expectations when they hear it. This is the same issue that we come up with the term escape room, which describes something that was created 7 years ago, and what it's evolved into, for the most part, does not represent it at all. It's like if you think of like your local carnival, or compared to Disneyland, what?
Right.
So I know that terms get really difficult, but on the other hand, they are, again, like you said, they're what people are familiar with, and it does help to set some type of expectation of what you're getting into when you go to something that's immersive or even interactive.
And anchoring to real life is a good way to go and give people an into the experience you're presenting.
Right. And if you're creating an immersive experience, the moment that someone arrives, let's say, for instance, they come, like in our case, from a theatre background. So a theatre audience is very, very used to having a ticket with a number on it. They know where to sit, they know to shut up, lights go down, they know to turn off their phones. You don't have to set up those conventions every time you start. When you start a new immersive or similar experience, you need to set up all of those conventions before you start. But if you're dealing with a contractual, say, contemporary ritual that we all understand the basics of, all you're doing is adjusting that knowledge. So you're starting from a common base of familiarity, and you're saying, this is like a date, but with these minor differences, or the Radio Ghost is like a ghost hunt, but and so on.
Okay.
So let's see what's beyond that but.
Yes. So let's hope this works well. Okay. So can you see this okay?
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Yep.
Great.
And
So this is me looking moody, and Peih-Gee Maravala on the other side, was artistic director. And we also quite try to own the fact that we are led by immigrant working class artists, especially to try and break that understanding of who art, or in this case, games or theater, who is it made by, who is it made with, who is it made for? That tends to be some of the questions we ask ourselves before any project, to make sure that work doesn't just get made for a little bubble and kind of just sort of, feeds itself. So here is Radio Ghost. Radio Ghost is a ghost hunt, but what you're hunting are not real ghosts. You probably guessed that. What you're hunting are what we call in the voices that are trapped in those very objects that we find so familiar in any shop that you enter, those rows and rows. And so some of the game is sort of asking you to find what's behind the packaging, what's, whose hands, what are the ghostly qualities of that object, how did it get there? What traces does it have? And it partly inspired by Tsukumogami, which is the Shinto belief that every object is for a spirit. So Radio Ghost is a 3-player, audio-led ghost hunt played in shopping malls. So it's 3-player because it started from this relationship that I mentioned earlier, when we started working with the Canadian research group in Montreal, Technocourt Arts and Games, which was to try and create a relationship that could only happen in the 3. That we'd just made Binaural Dinner Date for couples, and we wanted something that had to explore this triad, which is a very rare number in games. You usually have 2 or you have 4+. And there's a reason for that. It's very hard to find those emerging relationships, dynamics in real life. And also, we wanted it to be in shopping malls because we wanted to make sure that the opportunity to enter a space that, especially, for example, around here where we live in Newham in East London, where we work a lot in Liverpool, is, there's people that might be spending time in the mall but not buying anything. It might be just the only warm space or the only free space that you can hang out. So we wanted to make a game with affordable, that would work in any affordable phones, not the latest phone, and something that was immediate enough that anyone could say, okay, I'll give this a go. The ghosts are then found as you enter the shops, and you then become a reporter for the radio station. So first you meet Iva Taguri, which is an homage at the historical radio DJ Iva Taguri, and he's a very little sample of one of the audio experiences you have right at the beginning as you enter the mall. So you have this very sort of 80s sense of like progression, and as you enter the mall, you all hold down the button to enter that threshold, and there's very much a kind of 80s soundtrack carrying through the whole experience. But most importantly, what are we doing? What is the behavior that's being encouraged during the game? Is pretend shopping. So at the same time that you're playing a game in a mall, mall operators cannot stop you playing it because you're not disrupting the behavior that is expected of people, which is to look around, to walk around, to pick up a product. So externally, you're not showing any behaviors that threaten the shopkeeper or the security guards because you're blending in. That's part of the sort of secret mission. But through the audio, you are very much in a different space altogether. When I mentioned that it's a 3-player game, that was one of our biggest challenges, right? How to keep something very explorative as a person. You know, you can go around and have your own experience whilst at the same time having a meaningful relationship with others. And so without giving too much away, part of the game is that you become a reporter back. So you hear reports from these ghosts that you find in specific products that you pick. They're usually, as the image shows, coats, toys, or fragrances, so those types of shops. But then you also make location reports of where you visited, and you make reports about those human rights abuses or climate impact of certain choices, and they become part of these hundreds of voices of reports that are broadcast live in the radio program. So you are in fact one of the broadcasters as you play the game. And then one other element is very strong is that the game starts very fast-paced. You have DJ Ivor Taguri taking you through that kind of pace of consumerism. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And you start really fast. And then all those 80s songs are organized in the playlist so that throughout the whole game, which lasts about just over an hour, you slow right down. And the final task is for the group in whatever location you're in to remain absolutely still for 60 seconds. So I guess the message, so to speak, would be an awareness that it's not necessarily the case of us advocating for the eradication of consumption and production, but instead a sense of pace. Like how do you, in a way, how do you recognize how hard it is to slow down is by being as fast as you can. So that's kind of the trajectory from polar opposites at the beginning and at the end. Here are some mentions of a couple of dates that we have coming up in Liverpool, where we also based. And feel free to get in touch with us if you're listening to this and you happen to be in Liverpool in those dates, or to know someone who would like to play the game. It would be great to have you. I think I have one final clip that might give a kind of a bit more of a sense of the game, and then happy to talk more.
What if the mall is haunted? What if this is a ghost hunt? What if we could tune into invisible worlds? What if ghost hunting was a new way of seeing? What if we can summon the spirits of the exploited into audio being? What if we could reveal the skull under the skin of the mall? What if we could create playful unease?
All right now, for all you ghost seekers out there in the big city, all you spotters with an ear for the unseen, I've been asked to relay a request from the team. It's a special for today's hunt. This is going out to the 3-person team starting right now. Good hunting, team. We believe in you. Here's a hit for the believers, the non-believers, and the soon-to-be believers. Yes, my little hunters. It's Belinda with Heaven on Earth.
Okay. I have quite a few questions.
Do you want to stop sharing? And oh, perfect. And I'll put us back in the main. There we go. Really cool.
Yeah. So I'll start with some mechanical questions that I know folks are going to be wondering. What platforms can you eventually download and play this on, and when, assuming you can't attend in Liverpool on those particular dates?
So we've finished the game for Android only, and the game has been touring the kind of theatre and immersive theatre circuits, I guess you'd say. So festivals in London, Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester. There's a German version of the game that was translated and did some German festivals this summer, and we are hoping to create also Spanish version, Portuguese version, French version, and also talking to partners in South Korea, Macau, Hong Kong, and China. So fingers crossed, there'll be a lot of options. But right now, it's not on the App Store, it's not on the Google Store either. And we're applying for the last bit of money to make the game suitable for all platforms. So that wouldn't happen for another year, I would say. So for now, the best way to play the game is to convince your local festival to bring us over. And by bring us over, all I mean is it's a concept touring model. So we don't have any flights. We just either ship the preloaded phones, or we organize a local second-hand purchase of phones and then get them preloaded, and the facilitators get trained remotely. So it's very affordable. And we'd love to have, more relationships and make it available long term.
Interesting. So it's a 3-player game. So let's say me and 2 of my friends are playing. Are we moving around the mall together? Are we separated? Am I getting into plot points?
So you start together, and you start by picking a team name, and you also start by picking the roles that you all have in the game. So there's middle one, eldest, and the baby. So as a team, you decide. No one's going to fact check, so it's up to you to pick those roles. And then you have a moment at the setup where those roles get played out, and the tensions of the expectations, the stereotypical kind of young one and the older one, and the glue in the middle, and so on. And that kind of carries through a little bit throughout the game, but ultimately you then sent off in separate missions. So what keeps you together is the traces that you leave by the shops that you pick and the objects. So the shops that the first shops that each of the 3 pick are the shops that the other 2 are going to try and find and revisit. And the objects that you pick are the ones that the others are going to try and guess which ones you picked later.
And how specific, because I think it said that you leave clues for the other person to find. So how specific
through voice recordings?
Is it like, I'm in the Saks, Fifth Avenue, in the men's department over by the tie stand?
Opposite.
Is it something? Can you get that specific?
You get a 20-second window to make a location report, and then you can choose to dump it and record it again or not. But everything that you do, then you make as in your own way, as descriptive as you can, and then the person is going to try and find it. The game doesn't break if the person doesn't find it, but that's the first attempt. And then there's always kind of a plan B, C, D, so that everyone does get to enjoy the full the full game.
And then what do they like, so say they go and they're like, I think I found it. Are they supposed to like send you a photo? Is there like, you snap a photo, and if that matches,
you snap, you match only at the end.
Okay, so I was wondering, how do you verify? Objects, like how, is it like, do I have to take a photo of the object I've chosen, and then the person takes a photo of the object they think it is, and that way we can, verify that we have done it correctly?
So those, I guess that's the one of the kind of endless conversations we have with our game designer, collaborators and friends, which is, to what extent is the game kind of pure in a sense that either you find or you don't find? If you don't find, you go this way. Ultimately, those are prompts for actions, but we have written kind of a plan B and a C and a D. So whatever you do, you will end up with a moment of realization at the end that actually none of that matters. What really matters is this final action, and that one you do, lose or win. which is stopping for 60 seconds, and you get 3 chances. So it relies on the 3 players who've stopped still. And also, I guess what's that the other reason that players report that being the most significant moment for them, actually one of 2, is because that's the first time you feel like you're doing something subversive. I mean, standing still is nothing. However, at the pace of the mall, being in people's way, being in an awkward location, you're not expected to be standing stock still. And that's sort of when you feel the most resistance against the world around you.
I feel really
and then
awkward
you get
just hearing him say that.
Yeah. So that's the ultimate challenge.
When it comes to choosing the location that you're going to visit, because I saw find a store that sells fragrance, find a store that sells toys. How much agency do you have in choosing which types of stores you're visiting?
So it's interpretation. You might go into a tiny shop that is specialized in that product. You might go to a department store that has everything, and within that everything has a segment. So what you will do is once you've chosen it, you'll describe it as best you can to help your teammates then find it later.
Okay.
But it's entirely up to you where you choose.
Okay. And does everybody on the team visit all of the same places, or is it?
So it goes in a rotation. So once everyone's locked the first shop, they get revisited by the other 2, and objects get try and guessed by the other 2. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
So in effect, there's many games happening, but there's 2 environments. There's inside the shop and then outside the shop. So inside the mall as a whole, which is where the radio station is really the strongest, which is that the experience of walking, the pace slowing down. And there are other, the DJ, she has sort of 2 tones. One is the broadcasting tone, and one is the sort of whisper in your ear tone. And the whisper in your ear tone has quite poignant moments of observation where, for example, as you're walking past people, she kind of asks you to consider other things, such as, look at the first person you feel you would visit in hospital, or look at the first person you think could start a war, or look at the first person who thinks you could visit them in prison because no one else would, because what they did was so horrible. And at that moment, you start looking at people's eyes entirely differently. And so it's sort of the game shifts in register where you go, oh, I was meant to be looking for the shop. And actually this sort of, psychological, philosophical exploration, so that there's pockets of things that happen and you kind of change from register to register.
Interesting. So I'm hearing a number of different themes going on in the game. Is there I guess, and if this is spoiling too much, we can move on to a different line of questioning, but I am curious if there's like a central thesis to it that all of this is pulled around, or is this more about kind of broadly thinking more about the world around you and the items and the people around you?
So if I was wearing my university hat, I'd say that this has come out of a genuine inquiry about, can you, within a short period of time, can a game or a game-like experience start in someone a desire to behave differently, even if that is as little as slowing down? Okay, so it's not a kind of a big claim, oh, in an hour we can solve climate change. Not at all. But can there be a slight shift of, and Jaji, the artistic director, right at the beginning, she was calling it the whale song. She was referring back to 70s and 80s when the first recording of a whale song was made by accident. And someone then used that song to create this awareness that suddenly whales who no one cared about were made to feel empathy for. And there was just hearing them sing, right? So what was our whale song? And that became the slowing down, the stopping. And so that there is an actual underpinning research where we are talking to every player that we can about those slight shifts of awareness. So that's ongoing. But with my ZU UK hat and working with Jaji and our collaborators, ultimately, is the game any good Do people like it? Are they excited by it? And so what this has become, and it was, I guess, ready in July. I think July was when we finally had the final version that we were happy with. Is a game that people should really enjoy playing from beginning to end, and they should kind of have many things to talk about. So yeah, ultimately, I don't know if that answers your question, but there's kind of those two parallel tracks going on.
So you mentioned earlier, and your fuzziness on the definition of game and whether or not this is or isn't a game. I'm kind of curious. Let's explore that. What was behind that statement?
So our starting point is theater, right? Well, mine 20 years ago, Jaji 30, 35 years ago. We come together with a big dissatisfaction of theater. So we are theater people that don't really quite make theater, not quite theater. We found in TAG and Montreal, a lot of people that come together that sort of make game or game-like things that don't quite come from games. So visual arts, sociology, computing, and so on. So we found a tribe in a sense that no one's a purist, but ultimately, whether something is or isn't a game, it usually comes back to what's its purpose, what's its structure. Is it a winning, losing paradigm that you're talking about? The players have agency. And we've been there a lot in those conversations, and they tend to go around in circles. But ultimately, we are very open. We, ZU, are very open that we don't care. Ultimately, we don't care if we're making a game. However, what we care is about learning from games, from serious games, from game-like things, such as LARP, which is a huge area of research and interest for us. And elements of it can teach us a lot about how to host audiences and how to kind of create really exciting experiences for them. So that's it. Ultimately, it is an interesting conversation, but as long as the thing that comes out is understood by people and they feel like, oh yeah, I get it, whether or not it's a game, it kind of becomes not as important.
I mean, over at Room Escape Artist, we long ago had to have this conversation about what are the boundaries of what we cover and what we don't. What are the things we write about and we review, and what are the things that are someone else's domain to deal with? And what even constitutes a game? What constitutes an escape room? What constitutes an immersive game? Where we had ultimately landed on what our boundary was, is this experience playing out differently because I went and participated in it versus someone else? Is my presence, is my mind, is my body relevant in what ultimately plays out? And if the answer is no, then we'll leave it to the theater folks. And if the answer is yes, then sure, game. We'll call it a game.
Do you have agency to change how it plays out? That's what you mean, right?
To small or large degrees.
So we have a term that we use, which is pockets of agency, right? So, and that's very intentional and that's very purposeful and it's meaningful. Like, it's important to us. There is no change of outcome or no meaningful change of outcome because we're not really interested in that.
No, but the journey.
Our interest is right. So, for example, will Radio Ghost, if you press play, will it go from beginning to end without players? No, you can't, because there are there will be significant parts that will play, whatever people do, and then there will be parts that will be just empty. They won't be activated, right? But also, and that's why the 3-player was another significant part, and that's probably the hardest thing, and we won't stop thinking about it either. We will be looking for ways to keep on working on it. Is how does it feel meaningful that you're playing with other 2 people, or do you care at all about them, or you could just do your own thing? And ultimately, there's just enough that you do. And I'm saying you do as in the majority of players report that.
Broadly you.
Yeah, the broadly you. And that was important as well, because otherwise, why not make a one-player game, you know?
So, I mean, this all makes sense to me. I mean, in almost every immersive experience, the endpoints are usually pretty well predetermined. There are some instances where, you know, there are different binary states or a handful of different outcomes, but those outcomes are generally not the point. The point is the experience that you have along the way and the people you
Sorry
have them
to
with.
interrupt you, but I'll give you an example and why this is a bit of an important point for us. You may have heard of Punch Drunk. And such, like, I mean, it's just because it's an easy reference because it's so mainstream, but similar kind of school of immersive practice, which is basically design the hell out of a big warehouse, right? Have a few cool things happen, a beautiful scenario, poetic, and so on, and let people just wander, right? Let them just do their thing. Now, if that's a scenography show, fantastic. Right? An installation, beautiful. The moment that you use agency as an excuse for we couldn't be bothered to think of all the routes and we couldn't really care for audiences and actually tell them what their options are, then I think is really problematic, especially if you're paying hundreds of pounds or dollars for it. So this idea that, oh, it's a beautiful thing that people can keep coming back and find different routes. Well, they'll keep paying loads of money, so that works financially. But actually, people can only have agency if you've laid out their options, right? You can't just say, here's a dark corridor, off you go. Because like I did, and like many people I know did, paid money and end up missing everything. So if you can miss things, then you don't, unless things were happening in every room all the time, then absolutely fair play. You know, I wouldn't complain about that. So actually, I'm very skeptical of agency that is actually masking a lack of effort and rigor that's being put into thinking, well, why agency? Agency might be super important for a piece of work. Like I've seen many pieces of work in theater and in games where agency is just the right format. And there are many that actually the reason I enjoyed is because I had no agency. I could just surrender and go, you've designed this amazing thing for me. I'll trust you. It better be good. And it was.
The illusion of agency, really, but your experience is, you know, on guided rails, which I don't mind. I like being given missions and feeling like I'm useful, which anchors me into the reality. But I also have a fear of missing out. And, you know, too many times I've heard people come out of different experiences, and this person had an amazing experience because they found somebody, a character who stayed with them and, you know, gave them a really personalized thing. And someone else, usually me, wandering around lost, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Excuse me. We focused in on games early on in the broader immersive world because we really struggled with kind of the empty void that we found in a lot of immersive theatrical productions where there weren't the affordances that are inherently designed into games. It's part of the act of game design is figuring out how you're actually giving players the paths available to them and letting them choose then what to do with that. And I have a special love for things like emergent gameplay and game design that allows for emergent gameplay, which is actual agency.
Most people don't want agency. Like, that's why people are scared of going to immersive theater. They want to sit and just observe, right? And so it's really advanced, actually, to have an open sandbox experience. You have to be a very experienced type of theater goer, player, to know how to play. You have to be aggressive in pursuing the good, you know, storylines and things like that. So I do think when an experience that tells you what to do, where to go, you know, all of those things, giving you clues, like I do prefer I find that much more useful, and I do think it's friendlier for. Like you said, like, you had mentioned that you were interested in creating things that are more accessible to people and not so, elitist for the theater goers. And I do think that that is a good point, that your regular person who's never done this before wants to be guided more. They don't want an open sandbox.
Right. I mean, it does. Certain types of experience will privilege certain types of behaviors and personalities, right? And when we talk about being like reducing barriers for access, we definitely don't mean patronizing our audiences at all. But by lowering the barrier, you just get a sense of kind of onboarding and then going, oh, okay, you're ready, you're ready for more. So let's step it up. It's not necessarily going, oh, this has got to be mild and non-offensive because, it's accessible. Not at all. It's just about, okay, where you're coming from, you're welcome, you're welcome here, you belong. This is how it works. It's pretty simple. 1, 2, 3, pick this up, go for it. I'm here, need any help, metaphorically. And as things progress, then you start opening up those options. And binaural dinner date is a good example of that, where it starts quite mild. And then, you are facing potentially a stranger considering big questions as if you were to spend you're about to spend your life together. So I guess it's just having a nuanced approach to dramaturgy or to lazy terms, or we don't just hide behind things that are cool or things that sound, like the thing. Agency is good. Agency can be good in some matters. So, yeah, I guess as long as we as makers, as designers, are really upfront with our audiences and players, this is what it is, then they can decide. I mean, I'm out. Fair play.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I also like that you said it into a mall too.
Yeah.
This is like I was talking to David about this like 3 years ago, where I was like, retail is on its way out, and there's a lot of empty stores in malls, and what I would like to see is to see all of those empty retail shops become experience stores, so you could go in and play an escape room, or even acts, whatever, something where it's about play. You're going to come in and have an experience and play, and it's sociable, and it's not something that you can only do from online in your own room. So I also like the idea of you running this at the mall, where malls inherently aren't terrible places. I think they're cool. They're a giant indoor space. They're temperature controlled. You have access to a lot of options all at once, and some of those things, like shopping and looking through 10,000 different stores with clothes, might be on its way out. But I think there's certainly room to introduce new uses for this space that already exists.
Absolutely. And if Judge was here, the first thing she'd say is that, the original intention of malls was a utopia. It was created by a socialist architect, Victor Gruen, and who then disowned the idea of malls when he realized what they'd become. Oh. But originally, right, there was a good intention there.
I would say that is a general trend of anyone striving for utopia.
Yeah.
But
sounds good on paper. Yeah.
I came up in the generation that the mall was where you went in high school when you weren't, before you were old enough to go to bars. You hung out at the local mall, and it felt safe there.
There's safety there as well. Yeah.
You can run into you could maybe run into that cute boy from English class because he's there hanging out with his friends, and I'm like, bring back the mall.
So
great.
All right, we are approaching time. So, George, do you have any last thoughts, any kind of last pitches, things that you want to leave people with?
No, I'm just really happy to be here, and for the thankful for the invitation, and genuinely curious to hear from anyone who's made the effort to stay this long. And if you want to reach out, please do. We on the socials as IamZUUK, IAMZUUK, ZU-UK.com is our website. We have a few dates coming up in Liverpool, but as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for people that are excited about hosting the game. Anywhere in the world, as long as there's a mall near you. Yeah.
All right, cool. And I will just say that the IndieCade Anywhere and Everywhere Festival opens November 4th, and they are having their award ceremony on November 5th. So make sure you guys tune in and check that out to see the coolest new games coming out.
And Jorge, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I do look forward to the opportunity to play the game whenever that actually becomes available to me. So I'll be keeping my eye out and look forward to it.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us, and good luck with Radio Ghost.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.